So without further ado, I shall pass it on to our amazing moderator for today, a pupil in chambers at a Legal 500 firm, a former Scrum Master at Axiata Digital, member of the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple, and she's currently doing her bachelor's in law at University of London. Let's give it up for Simerpreet Kaur.
All right, thanks, Paviter. Yep. So just a small correction there. I've done my bachelor's just a pupil now, but thank you for that very elaborate introduction. So before we start, of course, let's have a quick intro into our speakers for today. So we have with us Mr. Deven, who is currently working with the UNHCR and with refugees. And we have Ms. Thulsi, who is working with a civil society organization on freedom of expression and human rights. And we also have Mr. Ali, who is DPP, a Deputy Public Prosecutor in Tawau. So while we're getting into that, actually, I think I've been asked by the speakers before we start to just give a brief background into law and how do you use that path, right? So for the benefit of our younger audience and those who are looking to get into the legal industry or looking to do a law degree, just a very, very brief summary, right? So bachelor's in law or an LLB is usually, done within 3 or 4 years. And then depending on your choice of whether you want to study locally, internationally, or in a private university, it may change whether it's 3 or 4 years. And then, of course, after that, you have the option after your degree of either you need to do the CLP, the Certificate in Legal Practice, so that you can qualify, or you could do what we call the bar in the UK. And of course, post that, there is pupillage or chambering. There is like 9 months of practical training with a legal firm. So just as we were getting acquainted the other day, all of our speakers, Deo and Ali and Thulsi, we realized we're all law graduates. And maybe we can start there, right, with our backgrounds, that we all started in pretty much the same place, but we've all come to end up in different places, and we've all had a different journey. So maybe we can start with Thulsi, right? Like, what was your journey when you, after studying law?
Hi, morning, everyone. After studying law, so after reading law, I graduated in 2012. I started my chambering quite soon after. I chambered in a medium-sized law firm, Srinivasan and Co. And it was quite an exciting experience, very tiring, very stressful, but equally challenging and exciting. After chambering, I quit law for a while to take a break and try and decide what I want to do. And I went into becoming a part-time research assistant. So I did research, general research on public interest matters, democracy, elections, and human rights mostly. And I then worked part-time for a human rights NGO called Hakam. I then also went back to practice in 2016. And did very selected cases. Some of it, mostly my experience with the law relates to civil litigation. And so litigation means you go to court and you, on behalf of a client, and you argue a case out for them. That's litigation. So litigation is divided into 2, civil and criminal, for the benefit of our students out there. And so my experience was mostly civil. I did 1 or 2 criminal cases, so very limited experience there. And after that, I got involved and managed to get a position with the Pakatan Harapan government, and I was working with the former Deputy Education Minister, YB Teo Niching. I was a private secretary and handling some portfolios with under the Education Ministry for her, looking into policy making and things like that. And then, of course, we know what happened. So I lost my job in 2020, March. And now I am very happily working with a group of civil society organizations promoting freedom of expression and human rights. Yeah, so that's briefly my journey. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Thulsi. I think we can then move on with David. Would you like to share how have you moved on from studying law as a law student and where you are today?
So thanks, Simerpreet. It's pretty much similar with regards to how the education process started. I think it starts with the LB degree and all of that. And then I did the bar, the Malaysian bar, the CLP, of course. And then I waited on for a while before I could get into my pupillage. Reason being is because I didn't want to practice law for various reasons. I thought that, or rather I said that it could wait for a while. So I did a bunch of other things. This is also things that I did while I was in law school. Stuff like photography, traveling, and a lot of other random jobs. So then after a while, I thought to myself, like, you know what, I think I need to do the pupillage and stuff like that. So I then completed the pupillage, stayed on with the firm for a very short while, and then realized that maybe practice was not my thing, or maybe practicing law in the corporate industry and doing construction work and arbitration maybe was not my cup of tea at that point in time. And so then I quit my job. I was traveling quite a bit also after that. And then I joined UNHCR. UNHCR is actually the refugee agency under the United Nations, for those of you that are not aware. And I've been with the United Nations since then. So not so elaborate, but yeah, pretty straightforward in that sense.
Right. I mean, I think you still found your calling, right? And you've been with the UN, I believe, for more than 7 years now.
Yeah, coming to about 7 years now.
Yeah. So that's a pretty short, but precise. You found your way, and you have your what we call the calling. Thank you for sharing, Deven. I guess we can move on to Ali. Ali, would you like to share with us from your student days till today? Where has life taken you? Ali, I believe you're on mute.
Good morning. Hi everyone, Muhammad Ali bin Imran. I'm a law graduate from Multimedia University back in 2017. I graduated in my just to recap about my career path. Usually for most law programs in your third year, you need to undergo this legal attachment, or it's more like an internship. So in my third year, I did my internship at UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency. It was quite a relatively short stint, about 4 to 5 months. And it was a good experience. We did a lot of groundwork, and the working staff came from a lot of diverse background, and I met wonderful people there. So once you finish this so-called legal attachment, we'll go back to law school to finish our remaining year, which is the final year, the fourth year. And during this fourth year, we are exposed to procedural subjects, criminal procedure, civil procedure, and this is to prepare us for the working world. Because once you finish your fourth year, the usual path is for law grads to find a firm and then do your pupillage, which is a 9-month training program. And this is what enables law grads to be called to the bar, which gives you sort of a license, so to speak, in layman's term, to appear in court. So I did that at a medium-sized firm called Ranjit Singh. I got called to the bar in 2018, and right. Oh yeah, and after I got caught, I practiced for a short while, and then in May 2018, I joined the Pakatan Harapan government as a support team legal assistant for the Institutional Reforms Committee. So I joined meetings with several stakeholders, and in coming up with the report for recommending institutional reforms to the government. It was a 3 to 4 months contractual basis. So once I completed that stint, I joined the government service through the Suruhanjaya Perkhidmatan Awam, and I got a place in the Attorney General's chambers. So I reported for duty in 2019, and I got posted to Sabah as a DPP, Deputy Public Prosecutor. So until today, I'm still a DPP in Sabah, prosecuting and conducting criminal trials.
Right, thanks for sharing, Ali. And I think on the education side, definitely there is a lot more we can explore, right? We all come from, we studied, law in different universities. We have gone through different options, and I'm sure the BIMBING team will have a lot of follow-up sessions for specifically students looking to go into law. And if any of our audience has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. And that's it. I think let's move on, right? Because this is a career day, so we want to know about your careers. And we have a couple of people who are in practice, a couple of people who also have a political background, and maybe let's start with Devin, right? What do you do at UNHCR, right? What is a typical day? What is the job description of working with refugees?
Okay, interesting question that, because so the United Nations, or rather the UNHCR Refugee Agency in Malaysia, is pretty unique in that sense. For those of you all that are not aware, Malaysia did not sign the Refugee Convention. As such, a lot of policies or legal frameworks, or the lack thereof, is not existent in Malaysia. So what happened was that in 1975, the United Nations, UNHCR, was invited to Malaysia to help with the 1975 crisis, where we received a lot of Vietnamese people and the Cambodians who were fleeing war and persecution from their country of origin. And we've been here since. And of course, it's a variety of things. When you look at refugees and asylum seekers, there's a lot of concerns that they have. They're highly vulnerable individuals. And because of the lack of policies and maybe a legal framework that helps to protect them, we step in to work together with the government. A lot of people will be like, oh, UN is an NGO. We are not an NGO. It's an intergovernmental organization, which means to say, we work together with the government to try and introduce policies and a framework and things like that to protect refugees and asylum seekers. So because just like you and I, they have a variety of problems on a day-to-day basis. Largely, the main concern to a large extent is that they do not have legal status in Malaysia. As such, there's certain concerns. So what I do specifically, or rather where the team and I, with the protection unit, of course, step in to assist when there's arrest and detention. So many of them get apprehended by the authorities and things like that. So we step in to provide assistance. Sometimes it's just advocacy. Sometimes it's legal representation to a certain extent. It really depends. And then we try and see how best we can assist them with some of the protection concerns that they have. And that also involves liaising with the law enforcement authorities and the law enforcement agencies to try and help those who are victimized. Because the legal framework in the country also extends to them in relation to, say, some of them who may be facing some injustice in regards to the criminal justice system and things like that. So there is that service, and they can access that services, and we try and get them into those services. But that's just one aspect of refugee protection in Malaysia. You have the medical assistance, you have education assistance. You also have something called registration for those who are not registered here in Malaysia. And then there's also status determination, whereby we do status determination for refugees and asylum seekers and things like that. So it's a whole array of things. And then we work together with various partners and in civil society organizations. We work together with the prosecution as well, the judiciary, to try and find a balance in providing protection assistance for refugees. So on a daily basis, this is what we see. And of course, for those of you that would like to know, just, in Google, just check out what's happening with refugees in Malaysia, and you'd see that's quite difficult for them. So we try and assist them as much as we can, and we work together with various stakeholders in the process. So in a nutshell, that's actually what I do in the United Nations, or rather in UNHCR.
Right. I think, there is a lot more than we usually know about UNHCR. Right? I mean, the very typical understanding is, yes, that it functions like an NGO, they're constantly under budget and, going out to the field and just, working with refugees. But I think there is a lack of detail in the public of, what what actually goes on behind the scene, what kind of help do the refugees actually need, right? Like education, school placement, and jobs and things like that. Thanks for sharing that. And we do have a question from the audience that is relative to our current strain and our direction, right? About working with politicians or in politics or in the government. Maybe let's start this off with Thulsi, and then we can jump on to Ali and he can expand since he is currently in the civil service as well. So Thulsi, maybe you want to start off with your experience.
Thank you, Simerpreet. I think working with politicians and working with PH, to me, the specter of politicians we have is quite wide. As the spectrum, of politicians we have in PH is quite wide. So as you know, we have, it's made out of 4 different parties, or it was rather made out of 4 different parties. Now it's back to less than that. I personally worked very closely with YB Tioneching and worked with the AP MPs most of the time. Of course, I worked closely with YB Mazli, for example, because we were in the education ministry. The experience was very enlightening. It was very exciting. I loved my job. The relation to law is very little, honestly. I think having a legal background, the advantage is that you go in having the armory of the legal profession with you. So you have an experience of speaking, you have the experience of looking through laws, you have the experience of trying to identify problems. That skill set is something you bring with you into politics. And politics involves a lot of policy making. And you then got to think about, okay, what is the existing system and how can I make it better? That was the primary aim in which we ran all of our work. So I was made in charge of more than one portfolio, but my main portfolio was improving vernacular schools, especially Tamil schools. So we have vernacular systems in the schools in the system. And so my job as in relation with education and politics is to see how what the ministry does is what the people want. So the connection is that politics is not about just campaigning, going out there, making noises, but it is about really creating good positions, writing and coming up with better policies. And I'm not just talking about policies that are out there, which you need to bring forward to Parliament and get approved, but we're talking about policy making at every level. So in the ministry, you talk about policy making that involves the size of the school, the size of the school canteen. Do we have enough schools in the urban setting? Do we have enough student to teacher ratio in our schools? So it goes down to the very minute details of education. And so how do you perform better? That was more the experience in terms of my service in PH, basically.
All right. Again, very colorfully painted. I think what we have these, I think it's just the lack of information, right? And that's why we have this entire virtual career day. So maybe we can corroborate that and also add on to that. Ali, if you'd like to share, because I think you mentioned that you worked with PH for a while as well, and you're also currently in the civil service. So, what was your experience there, and what's it like to be working in the civil service, especially in the judicial sector?
Okay. During my time with the Institutional Reforms Committee, it wasn't a job that requires for you to meet politicians. It's more like we meet stakeholders, we meet heads of government bodies, commissions. It's just a matter of we're getting a lot of we just want to get a lot of feedback from in coming up with our recommendations. So it is a quite interesting experience. I don't think I can get that kind of experience elsewhere, because it was kind of unique, because change of government, you don't have that happen so often. So you have this very unique period, transitional period, where we have a new government after a change of after 60 years of the administration, and a lot of people from PH, they want to see a lot of changes, especially in the civil service. Of course, my experience later as a government servant, I wouldn't want to comment much, because sometimes I'm still a government servant. But then again, I think it's what you bring to the table, instead of us making observations, and then we don't like certain things, so on and so forth. But yeah, sorry for the I apologize if I can't elaborate further, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we understand, but yes, I think the interesting point there is definitely that we have lived throughout a historical transition period, especially for this sector, right? The legal, justice, and civil services, because it's such a huge, drastic change in not just government policies and direction of the entire nation as a whole. And I think even for our audience and maybe the general public is not very informed about what actually goes behind the scenes, and how much of effort and time and how many people contribute to, making the policies and laws of the land. It's just a very much of a gray area. But being a gray area, I think law also has a reputation for being a very flexible degree, right? Or that's what it's known for. And also looking at, again, where we have all applied our own education in the legal background. I think another question would be, is it necessary law degree for me to be working in a civil organization or with UNHCR, or I guess definitely with the AG chambers or with the judicial sector, it is absolutely necessary. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ali. So how can I use my law degree if I have it, or is it necessary for me to enter in any of the sectors that we are in today? Maybe let's start with Thulsi.
Certainly not. You don't need a law degree for I don't think you need a law degree to work in the UN. Correct me if I'm wrong, Devin. I don't think so. Going into politics, you don't need law as well, or civil society organizations. Law is not a prerequisite. It aids, it makes it better. You have an added age, of course, if you have a law degree. I think during any interviews or job filtering process, employers will always give you that extra credit, I suppose, if you have a law degree. But then again, times have changed so much now that the law degree's value is also quite questionable now compared to other upcoming degrees and upcoming career paths that you have, So no, I don't think it is a prerequisite. It is definitely a degree that is wholesome. It comes with a lot of advantage. You have a lot of industries that you can go into and excel in if you choose a law degree. But that is by no means an answer to, I don't know what to do, therefore I just choose to do law. I think a lot of us have been there, and I myself was in that position. I didn't know what to do, and I thought, okay, I'll just take law for now, and maybe with that I can do whatever I want to do in the future. But a lot more opportunities to learn about careers are available today than 10 years ago. So my advice to students is to try and see how those platforms can be explored before you sort of adopt a position where I don't know what to do, so therefore I want to do law.
Yeah, thank you. Age-old quote, right? I think I relate very personally to that. About 5 years ago, I was in exactly the same boat. And in fact, I actually switched my major, my entire degree. I was doing engineering and then I jumped into law because I was just, unsure what to do. It's always the safe backup choice. How about Ali? Maybe you can share with us how definitely I think in the sector you're in, it is absolutely necessary. But how about, if someone is not looking to be, a prosecutor or a judge, are there any other options in the civil service?
Sure. Just before that, I would like to add on what Thulsi said. You don't need a law degree to join politics, and I think you don't need any kind of education to join politics. I think so. Okay, moving on. In the AGC, the position is pegawai undang-undang. So clearly, they require for applicants to be legally qualified, which means that you need to have an LLB, the DPP, the law degree. And okay, so when we say a pegawai undang-undang legal officer in the AGC, it's actually we are applying to a commission, which is the Suruhanjaya Kehakiman dan Perundangan. It's the Commission for Legal Service, Judicial and Legal Service Officers. So there are quite a number of branches in this sector. You'll have the AG's chambers, and you'll have the CR's office, the Chief Registrar's office. So when we cannot decide which branch we would like to go on, but say we are admitted to the AGC. So under AGC, you'll have DPPs, Deputy Public Prosecutors, and you'll have legal advisors attached to ministries, legal advisors attached to state governments, and also separate divisions within the AG itself, like the drafting division, the international law division, and law reform research division. So just to make my point is that doesn't mean that once you join AGC, you automatically become a DPP. There are other options as well. And for CR office, you'll have positions such as the Senior Assistant Registrar, legally qualified as well. And then you have magistrates and Sessions Court judges. So for High Court judges, it's entirely a separate commission on its own because they are appointed by Yang di-Pertuan Agong on advice of the Prime Minister. So they are not a government servant in that sense, and they are separate from the Judicial and Legal Service Association. I saw this one question on the chat box. What is the DPP and do you go to? Okay, yeah, sorry. Just for some, just to clarify to maybe some of you are not familiar with the public prosecutor's role, the position. Say for example that you have a private case, you have a civil case, you want to sue someone, you can pick your own lawyer. You want to say you got into a road traffic accident, and then you want to sue that person for your insurance claim. You have the option of appointing your lawyer. But for criminal cases, the police will, they are the ones who will carry out the investigation upon receiving a police report. So if there's an offense, it will come to the DPP's office first. We will give the sanction to charge, which is we will give them permission to initiate criminal proceedings against a particular individual or say a company. So when you go to court, a DPP's job is to represent the public in the sense that we are the ones who will be presenting evidence to the court on why this person should be found guilty, because we were the ones who that's why we are called public prosecutor. We act for the public, and it is different in the sense that members of the public, individuals, they cannot appoint a specific DPP. So, yeah. So basically, that's it. Oh yeah, I saw Gurpreet just asked, can we say you guys are the government's law firm? Yes, essentially that is the case. because you know, the Prime Minister appoints the Attorney General, which also acts as a public prosecutor. So in a sense that the Prime Minister appoints his own lawyer, appoints his own legal firm, and then under the officers attached to the AGs, essentially his legal assistants. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Ali. I think, yes, like we also have some follow-up questions that maybe we can take in a break. You can take a break. We can start with, I think the earliest question we also had was about, you know, skills that I need in either, you know, being a lawyer or you know, as a law student. Do extracurriculars like debating, mooting, do they help? Is it necessary? And since we have heard a lot from, you know, from the general legal sector point of view, and I think there is probably an edge there. Maybe we can have a bit of an atypical, you know, answer to this question. If Deven, you want to share, we can start with you. Did you, as a law student, you know, join debating societies, moots? Did you find it useful, although you're not practicing as a lawyer today?
Quite frankly, when I read law, we did not have any mooting for various reasons, because the college that I was at, the facilities did not come then. It came much later, and they had lovely facilities after I left, which is very frustrating, by the way. I'm not going to name which college or what, because I'm very loyal to those individuals there, and the people were good to me. But yes, most certainly, I think those things really help. A lot of people will say, hey, you know, we were just discussing the other day, you know, would history be a necessary thing? Must my public speaking be really good? Should I be a great debater, you know, and things like that? Well, I must say I did debating in school. I did both Malay and English debating in school, but I don't know whether it would help in practice, because to be quite frank, my experience is very limited on that note. So I must say that, yes, it does give you an experience. It does gives you an exposure. But I think more importantly is the communication skills that you develop in those processes. I think that's something that you would encounter as you grow. You'll encounter that as a practitioner, and you'll, of course, develop the skills as you go as well. You know, but I think what is also important is that, as mentioned earlier, and everyone is talking about legal, or rather law, being a very interesting subject. It's a very, very unique social science subject, right? It gives you an insight to a variety of things, which you will use when you go into court, and which you will use when you're doing advocacy in court, because you must understand the legal work in Malaysia is actually divided into two. You've got the soliciting, and then you've got the advocacy as well, the advocacy aspect of the legal work as well. So, you know, it's a hybrid of two things. Lawyers in Malaysia do that. In other countries, they don't do that. You have specifically solicitors just doing the paperwork and the drafting and all of that, and advocacy, or advocates rather, they go to court and argue those cases and things like that. So yes, there is, it gives you a certain experience into what it might be like, but it's not a prerequisite. It's not something that you must do. Oh, I need to be very, very good at history and things like that. No. If you have the mind to understand certain subjects, if you have the mind to understand the law, read the law, know where to find the law, that in itself is a very good thing. I've seen many people who were mathematics teachers and stuff like that, who stopped being teachers and then read law and became very, very good practitioners. You know, so you think like, oh, this person's got a scientific mind, you know, he's calculating and stuff. So maybe there's some skill that he was able to bring from that field, in a sense, into law. Something that I don't do, and for those of you all who will be wondering, oh, is this guy actually a lawyer with UN? No. Just to also let everybody know, for you to practice law in Malaysia, you need to be attached to a legal firm. And this is, of course, private law, as Ali pointed out earlier, unless you're a DPP and you're working with the AGC, of course. So you need to be attached to a legal firm in order for you to have your practicing certificate, and then you're able to practice law. Now, when you're with a different agency or a civil society organization or whatever, you may have your certificate, but it's not valid. It's not, when I say not valid, what I mean to say is that you're not active. You know, you're just parking it for a short while, and then you go do your other thing, and you can come back again, renew your practicing cert, and then you can go into practice again. So I just thought I'll point that out as well. But coming back to your question, in my personal opinion, it is not a prerequisite to be able to be a great debater and get into law. No such thing.
All right. I think you debunked quite a few myths for us. Thank you for that. Thulsi, I think when we were talking the other day, you also were mentioning there were a few myths I think we could use this session to debunk, right? And also, for example, David, when you mentioned you knew math teachers and people who have kind of made that switch and then studied law as well. We don't really have a typical background of someone who studies law. Again, relating personally as someone who was in STEM, and even I have family members who were teachers, actually math and science teachers for 20 years, and only studied law after getting married and having kids. So I think there is no one typical background, but yeah, Tulsi, you also having, I think, some other myths you could debunk for us.
I think one of the major myths is that, oh, you need to be really good at sejarah, history. So, and that is a subject that you must have to get to law school. So just to share a little bit about my experience, so I did Form 5. Of course, everyone does Form 5. And of course, science stream that time. And history was a compulsory subject. And what happened after my Form 5 was I opted to do Form 6, STPM. And I realized then there's no way in the world that I'm going to survive a science stream of Form 6. And so I decided, okay, let's take art stream. And my choices were very limited, right, for art stream subjects in STPM. And my school at that point in time, they had 2 classes. And I think a lot of students might be able to relate, although STPM is not so popular at the moment. You either take a class that gives, that enables you to take history and Bahasa Melayu, and you have a class that enables you to take accounts and economics, I think. So they segregate you and they predetermine what you need to take in order to sit in that class, which I think is total rubbish. What we often forget is the fact that both SPM and STPM are open certificates, which you can choose what subjects you want to take. But because of the sheer volume of students we have and the complete disregard for the number of teachers we need to have in the system, the whole education system has in 40, 50 years turned into, I tell you what to take, you take what I want to take, you take what I tell you to take, so that it is easier for me to manage the system, which is very bad. Eventually, you have a churning factory of students who are already pocketed into compartmentalized into categories. So okay, I'll go back to what I wanted to share. So I realized that in my head that, okay, wait, STPM is an open cert. I, for one, love history, but I didn't like the Malaysian syllabus. I really didn't like the Malaysian syllabus. So I thought, I'm not going to spend 1.5 years reading 4 thick textbooks on stuff that is, I don't know, I think half truth, half not truth. I really don't want to comment about that. But I was very skeptical about the quality of history lessons in Malaysia, in public school, in the public syllabus. So what I did was I did my own research. So at that point in time, I already knew, okay, maybe I want to do law. Law is like a backup plan, at that point in time. So I thought, right, let's check out local universities and see if law is history is a prerequisite to get into law school. And it wasn't. It wasn't a prerequisite, So I did my own decision. I dropped history. I dropped Bahasa Melayu because that was also not a prerequisite, which the whole world was telling me, oh, you must take these 2 subjects to become a lawyer. You must be good in history to become a lawyer. No, you don't have to be good in history to become a lawyer. In fact, the law, if you really look at it, is a very technical subject. Yes, it's a lot of words, but behind those words, the mechanics of law is a technical subject. It's a mechanical process. You read and understand the law. You read and understand what are the elements of involved in a certain area of law. Let me give you a very quick example, because as students, you may not understand what actually is the law. What does it encompass to become a lawyer? One small example I can give you is this. How do you convict a person for murder? Number 1, you need to have 2 main elements. There must be intention and there must be the act itself, right? So the law is you have to fulfill number 1 and number 2. So 1 plus 2, which is intention and the act itself, equals to murder. So you can never establish murder if you don't have either one. Or, sorry about that, but you don't have either one, right? So then it's a mechanical process. It's fulfilling of elements, and you find evidences to fit these elements, right? That's basically one aspect of the law which people fail to understand or don't really understand until you're really in the process. Yeah, so history is barely anything. So I made my own decision at that point in time, which you will also need to be making now, right? Don't waste time doing things that the system requires you to do. So I dropped history, I dropped Bahasa, I took economics, and I took English literature in Form 6. I found my own tuition teacher for English literature, and I had the best time of my life. So during history lessons, I will leave my one classroom and I will go into the other classroom to take the economics lessons. And I made friends. I had friends in both classrooms, and I was very happy because I loved economics. It was really good. I think it's a very important subject if you want to look into business studies and finance and things like that. Yeah, so make decisions like that yourself.
Thank you so much, Thulsi, for that. I think that was very insightful, especially for the students. Like, we know a lot of them throughout the past 2 years have been struggling with not just remote learning, but on the added pressure of what do I do now that I'm done with my SPM and SCPM, and now looking at career choices. That is an amazing, amazing insight. Thank you so much for that. And I think the other myth, as you mentioned, is, being good at languages, I have to be some sort of Shakespeare to go into either reading law or in the civil service or whichever other career I need. Yes, you need, I think, a basic understanding of the languages, but it's always a work in progress, isn't it? And we do have actually very interesting questions from our audience, and we have one from Harman, who is asking, if I want to work with political parties or assist them in any manner or form. Do I need a law degree? What if you come from different backgrounds, say engineering or finance or research sciences or any of our other careers? Maybe we can start off with Ali, and then Thulsi and Deven, you guys can jump in and add on.
Okay, sorry, Seema, I couldn't find the question in the chat box. Is it not here?
I think, okay, it was a direct message. I'll just, I'll send it over to you. But yeah, basically the question is, what kind of education do I need, if I want to join politics or assist political parties?
Okay, for two different pathways to join politics. I don't think SPM is even a prerequisite. But to help to work in MP's office, usually when you say you want to help with you want to help or work with a local politician, is that you are attached to a certain MP via the MP's office. You have the Pusat Khidmat Ahli Parlimen. We have it throughout the country, throughout the constituencies. I wouldn't say law degree is like the ultimate degree for you to get into. To get attached to the MP's office, but I believe it would help a lot. But then again, I've seen some officers, special officers to certain ministers, or even support team assistants for the for MPs. They have quite a range of education background, but mostly social sciences. Coming back to the question, what are the questions again? Oh yeah, I've also met an officer who has an engineering background. She's attached to Hanayo's office, the MP's office. But I don't think it's that strict for you to have a certain specific degree for you to be able to join an MP's office. So as long as you have good social skills, I guess that's more important.
All right, thanks for that, Ali. And I think we can come back with what Thulsi also has shared earlier, that politics is less about campaigning and getting votes, and it's more about, you know, knowing what the people want, the policies, doing, you know, enough research, and having a you know, a guess about what you think people need, and then, you know, doing the research and finding out that actually it's something completely different. Thanks for that.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just want to add one more, if it's okay. Because you know, an MP's job is not like, it's not always about law. It's not always about law reform. They also need input from other aspects as well, town planning, and then the economics as well. So it doesn't limit your options. Like if you have a specific degree, so you can still you would still be able to join and assist political members of any political party. Sorry.
Yes, it is indeed. So I think we have covered that I think about a lot of parts of what we do in our day jobs, right, and our career, and you guys see that every day. You talk about it every day. And just before we move a bit further, I think there was another question from one of our audience members about, you know, what do we learn in our 9 months of pupillage, and maybe you can just summarize it real quick, looking at the time. So pupillage, in the 9 months, you basically learn all the practical aspects about you know, practicing law, right? You learn a lot of advocacy skills. It's like learning on the job, and a huge part of that is also ethics, learning ethics, and how to, you know, ethically deal with your clients, or whether you have conflicts between who you represent and the other side, or with the judges. And, you know, what about if your client confesses to you, or if you know that your client is, you know, whatever, money laundering, terrorism. So there's a lot of moral questions that sometimes as practitioners you would struggle with, and that's the ethics course. Then a significant part of pupillage is also legal aid, where we are required to spend at least 14 days with the legal aid center in any state that we are doing our pupillage in, and that is basically providing free legal services for people who need it, either in the criminal or civil sectors as well. And I think if it is a very huge and interesting field, the law and the legal practice in itself, we will definitely, you know, be probably having follow-up sessions and questions on this. So moving on from, you know, the normal boring career things, maybe let's switch it up a bit, right? In all your current careers, we have our career, but what do you do outside of work? You know, and I think another key question would be, do you feel you are successful today? Is this your definition of success? You know, do you have that work-life balance a real thing? Do you struggle with it? So maybe a lot of questions. So let's maybe start with, you know, what do you do outside of work? Are you completely passionate about your work that you don't need an escape from it? I know I need an escape sometimes. Maybe let's start with David.
Sima, I think you feel that way because you're still doing your pupillage lah. So it's a natural consent. I mean, it's something very common lah among pupils. Anyway, so what do? I do a bunch of things. Working with UNHCR is not the only thing that I do. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, when I was reading law, there was a bunch of things that I did. I worked part-time. I did a lot of photography. I did a lot of videography. I traveled quite a bit as well. And I think that's really, really important lah. No, I did not do that, Gurpreet Singh. But so yeah, so there's a lot of things that I did, and there's a lot of things that I do beyond work as well. I do a lot of sports. I'm very, very involved with sports and stuff like that. So it's about finding the balance, right? And sometimes, to a large extent, when you do have these other things that you do, it gives you a different perspective onto life. You know, as students, when we're all growing up, you know, our parents are telling us, hey, listen, you got to do this, you got to do that. Coming from very Asian background as well, you know, you are somewhat forced into doing certain things and stuff like that. But I think what is important is for you to take a moment and think about what it is that you really want. I speak for myself, you know, there's a lot of things that I've done in my life, and I only was able to understand certain things because of the exposure that I had. It was that I allowed myself to experience those things. And when you experience those things, then you will find that thing that resonates with you. And when you do find that thing that resonates with you, you will want to embark on a career with it. What happened was that when I did my law degree, when I finished CLP, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do law. And I went full on onto photography. I was doing a lot of work in relation to that in media and stuff like that. But I made certain promises when I was very young to a very special individual to me. And I said, like, you know, I'm going to go and read law. I need to be called to the bar. And so I said, I'm going to go do it, you know, for that person. Otherwise, I know he might be not very happy with me or whatever reason. So I did. I got called to the bar and stuff. And it was at that point when I realized, like, is this really the path for me? And then that's when I made that switch. And the process in making that switch wasn't easy, because your experiences as a child, when you grow up, you know, you grow up in an Asian family and things like that, it's very, very different. Why I'm saying this is important is because when you expose yourself to a lot of things around you, you see what is available out there, and then you give yourself that option. And when you do that, you're able to make informed choices. You're making a choice because it's important to you. A lot of people be thinking about finances. Oh, you know, I'm going to be struggling if I don't do well. You know, what happens if I just go and work with a CSO or an NGO and things like that? Am I going to be paid well? Well, if your motivation in life is not necessarily finances, and if you are able to find that balance, then why not? Because if you're passionate about it, then why don't you? It's no harm in pursuing it in a sense. And that's exactly what happened. And working with, you know, like, of course, Thulsi can relate to this, you know, when you work with CSOs, when you work with NGOs or international organization, work is hard. Work is really hard. It's sometimes very, very difficult, because sometimes you're fighting the current. Can you imagine walking through or walking against the current? And it's very hard at times. So you also now need to process those things. And when you are able to allow yourself to process those things is only when you are able to know that, okay, that's my cup of tea. I will do this because I like it. And that's how you make those choices. So don't ever think that I finished my law degree, I got to go do law. You know, it's a process. At the age of 28, I need to have a house, a big car, and I need to be partying it up. No. Take your time. All right. I think it's a process. Understand that it's a process. So yeah, that's my take, and which is why I think even I delayed, you know, after law, CLP and all of that, there was a delayed process. I gave myself some time, and it's always okay to take a break. And yeah, get yourself involved in sports. You're going to play football, play futsal, go ahead, knock yourself out, you know, get those things out of the way as well. I mean, have those things in the way as well, sorry. So yeah.
Wow, Deven, you live a very colorful life. Yeah, I think you have a lot of things going on at the same time. But I mean, kudos, you can balance all of that. And I think we would love to hear from our other speakers as well, Thulsi. If you'd like to share, you know, about what do you do outside of work, and you know, or is, you know, are you with the typical, you know, that not typical, sorry, that quote that resonates. If you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life.
I echo everything Deven has said. I think it's very important for you to take your time and decide. I personally am very unhappy with the way things are in Malaysia, where we are forced to rush into decisions. By 22, you need to have a degree. By 24, you need to buy a car. By 25, you need to buy this. By so and so time, you need to like be very well in your career. That is a very unhealthy and toxic rat race that you don't need to get into. But I understand that not everybody is privileged to take a different route as well. So I can relate to that as well. But I think outside of having a career in law or anything you do is what's important is you must enjoy your work. I think that is something you need to be able to figure out yourself. When I was working with PH, I loved it. I loved every single day. I barely had a life. There was no weekend. I was on my phone the whole time. And I think till I had a dent in my finger that was very obvious because I was holding my phone most of the time. But what I loved the most about it is because I was able to be in a position that made differences. not differences that I can announce in the press and say, oh, PH did this and my boss YBTO did this, or we did this, or DAP did that. But it's small changes that makes a difference to the everyday lives of teachers, students, and the education community, for example. But outside of work, I, at the moment, work with civil society organizations. And Devin is right, the work is not easy. It's very tough. You're working against the current, especially with the current, I mean, especially with the existing political landscape and a government that just wants to have its own way. And that's really tough. So working hours are also a little bit more than just 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. And what I also do on the side is I am a DAP member, and I have been a DAP member for quite a long time. So I also currently help a state assembly representative, YB Rajiv. So he's a representative in Bukit Kasing. So I am his Women Empowerment Initiative coordinator. So I help with organizing programs, and I sort of do it as part of my career advancement as well. And other than that, I think it's important to find your own rest time, self-care routine that you like to have. So it can be as simple as I do nothing, or it can be get a cake a day, or I don't know, or a half an hour yoga routine, or it can be a 1 hour season Netflix time for yourself, or Amazon Prime, whatever that you have. I think it's important to have that, and but I think also as you advance in your career, or as you grow older, I don't know how old is the youngest here in the group, in the room. It's important to try and do things that are outside what the system requires you to do. I go to school, I go to work, I do my homework, I go to tuition, done. No, that's not it. Do stuff that are extra. Yes, it's difficult. You got to get up early, you got to sacrifice your weekend, you got to sacrifice your after work hours, but the benefits you reap is something that you will see 5 years down the road. You make friends, you get to know people, you have extra skill sets, you know what people's lives are about, you're able to relate, you have empathy. These are skill sets that people often forget. I just want to highlight that. Thank you, Simerpreet.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Thulsi. I think definitely it is something that is often overlooked. And I think we were also talking about, your definition of success is very personal, right? Like you say, you could be, on your phone all day, only have 2-3 hours of sleep and still feel happy. And you could be working a 9 to 5 and still feel miserable. And then, well, on the topic of success, I think this is a bit of interrelated, right? And maybe we can move on to Ali on this. What is your definition of success? And also, I think there's a question of, the typical definition of success, where people think, I make a lot of money, and a lot of people think they want to go into, reading law or practice, thinking that I want to make a lot of money. So maybe you can share about, what success means to you, how do you balance, work in other parts of your life, and maybe then take us on to what is the expected salary you can see for a fresh grad.
I also saw this question from Sarabji. Not sure if she's a not participant, right? Okay. Salary range as a fresh grad, and it's a progression like after. Just before that, would also like to add on, Thulsi said just now, it's unhealthy to have this mindset where at the age of 22 you need to graduate by the age of 22. By the age of 24, you need to get a car, so on, get a house, everything. I'm 28. Going 2028 this year. I don't have a car. I don't have a house to my name. I rent a room. I use Grab car. I commute every day using Grab car. So I'm still doing okay. I'm not saying I'm doing really well, but doesn't mean that you need to follow that kind of mindset. Only then it becomes a measure of success. So don't have that kind of mindset. And I agree with Thulsi, it's very unhealthy. And to answer the salary range as a fresh grad, as a law grad, I think they would consider pupillage payments first, because once you grad, you join pupillage. So let's say that's your career path. There's this talk and issue about pupillage shouldn't be getting allowance, because the old school lawyers say, oh, you're learning this much, I'm giving you experience, now you're complaining you're not getting enough pay. I'm like, come on, you need to have a livable income. And I was lucky enough to have a very kind pupil master. He gave me it was almost like a really normal and kind of expected fresh grad salary. But then again, for pupillage, it ranges. You have pupil masters who don't pay you at all, and you have pupil masters who pay like 4K per month for pupil. So it depends. But as an LA, that's a safer question to answer. So I guess it ranges from 2.5K to 6K, depending on the size of the firm. And the progression, say, from the civil service, you'll have an annual increment of 250 per year. If your grade, we have this grade called jawatan lah. So you have grade 41, and then you'll jump to 44 after a few years. So if you are stuck in the same grade, you'll have the annual increment of 250. But for law firms, increment progression it ranges, like depends on the firm. Sorry, Simerpreet, I didn't get the question before that.
What is your definition of success, and what do you do outside of work?
Okay, I mean, that definition of success, I mean, it all depends on, I mean, I work as a DPP, and then I don't see getting convictions as a success. As long as I present all the evidence and I don't suppress any evidence, for me that's good enough. Because after all, we are officers to the court, we are duty bound to exercise our duty to find out the truth. So if you're a DPP, from this perspective as a DPP lah, say if you're chasing after convictions, it will tempt you to conceal certain evidence just because you want to secure that conviction. And I see that happening in the States. We have cases like the prosecutors, they call it district attorneys. They conceal evidence so that they could reach a KPI of 5 convictions per month. So that's why I don't use conviction rates as a kayu ukur, so to speak. After, just to answer on what I do outside of work, I'm quite an outdoor person. I like trekking. Sabah is a very nice state to be an outdoor person. We have Sempurna, Lahad Datu, we have really nice pantai, Mabul Islands. I mean, the water is like clear blue. Doesn't make sense, to have this, to have that kind of pristine pantai, laut, pulau. And then you have the hutan simpan, the proboscis monkey in the reserve forest. And then I went 2 years ago, I hiked Mount Kinabalu, and then it's like working in Sabah is like trip, and it's like working trip, So you always find time outside of work to do all this kind of activities. So that blows off a lot of steam from work, the pressure from work, relieves a lot of stress. Yeah.
Can imagine. I mean, if you live on nearby Ajati, and within the afternoon you're in Pulau Sipadan and diving. Wow. Yeah, I think Thulsi, is jealous. I think we're all in the same boat, Thulsi. We're all jealous of Ali right now. All right, thanks for sharing that, Ali. And I think we did have a lot of ways, and depending on your own preferences and personality, you would have a lot of ways to blow off that steam. And coming back a bit to the financial part, we've talked about how much you can earn, and like we say, yes, there's a difference in the private and government sector, and the progression is different as well. And I guess maybe for the benefit of our audience, you know, it takes 7 years to become usually average partner and to become qualified to become a pupil master. And also at that level, yes, the salary ranges. You can basically be your own boss and you know, taking everything. But there is, yes, of course, the years of work, the progression is long there as well. But it's coming back on finances and a bit more, you know, let's backtrack to when we were 18 and 19 years old. And I think this is also a huge question amongst our younger audience. How do we finance our study, right? And also looking at our different backgrounds here, where Dave and Thulsi, you guys did the CLP, and I did the bar, and Ali, you studied at local U, so there was no CLP. And you know, let's talk about our experience there, right? What it was like to do the CLP, the myths, you know, that it's a horror story that we always hear. And also, you know, financially, did you apply for PTPTN or, you know, was it privately funded? Maybe let's start with David.
Thanks, Sima. Okay, I funded my education, the whole process. I worked part-time and I funded my own education from the get-go. But what I was also fortunate to receive from the college was a sports scholarship, because I played sports for the country for a while. And so they gave me a scholarship, so to speak. So that reduced my payment by an enlarged lot. So it was, I didn't have to pay the whole fee, but I just had to work part-time as well to be able to support the additional finances. And I also applied for PTPN at the same time, but I didn't get much, and I'm still paying that loan. So that's that option that's available for people out there. And I'm going back to the whole sports thing is because some of you all may be demotivated by hearing your parents say, hey, listen, don't do sports. It's not going to, you know, give you anything and all of that. Trust me, there's so many institutions out there who are giving sports scholarships to everybody. I know a few, like I think APU is doing that. Taylor's is doing that. HELP is doing that. It really depends on the sports that the universities also play, because they partake in some professional leagues in Malaysia. So therefore they try and recruit good players and give them the education and things like that. So don't feel dejected when you are playing sports and someone is saying, you know, don't do it. And if you're really good, keep at it. If you're playing at state level, national level, just keep at it, because there is opportunities out there. Once again, when I joined this particular college at that point in time, it was still, you know, they're still building on a lot of things at that point in time. So maybe the scholarship wasn't as much, but I still received something. That's that. And then you asked about CLP and what CLP was like. CLP was interesting. A lot of them, or a lot of y'all who are on this chat today or this discussion today may be doing a CLP. Don't be demotivated by any chance. A lot of people will be saying, oh, CLP is the worst. It is the worst. Let me just put it out there. But it is a process. You must know that, you know, I've known people who don't put any effort, none whatsoever, and are able to get through the papers. And then some of them who study really hard day and night don't get through those papers. It took me 2 times to get through CLP. The first time I failed my 2 strongest subjects, criminal procedure and civil procedure. I was really, really confident with those papers and I failed them. You know, questions that I could even just regurgitate from the CPC and still fail them. So you can see that there is a mysterious process in this whole marking system for CLP. Nobody knows. I don't know what the process is, but don't give up, you know, in that sense. It is gruesome. Why I say it's gruesome is because you have to have the temperament to go into the exam hall and be able to address those questions and give whatever that's required of that question. And you have 3 hours to do that. And you have to read so many things. You have to read the law, you have to read the cases, you need to know the sections, this, that, and then come there and then deliver all of that within 3 hours, which is quite difficult. And then you have one paper, 1 day break, and then you do the next paper. What I heard from people who were doing it post-COVID were doing it like back to back, day after day. So can you imagine doing one heavy paper one day and then the next day and stuff like that? So all I'm trying to get at is when you're doing the CLP, don't be so stressed about it. You know, take it as another exam. Understand the law. You know, go into it with positive attitudes in that sense, because you never know. You could be studying day and night and still not get through, and you don't know why. So in a nutshell, with regards to how did I finance my education, that was how I did it. With regard to CLP, that was my experience as well. But don't be worried. I remember one guy who was studying with me CLP, who is now a inspector in IPD Gombak. And whenever we meet in court, sometimes we'll be talking about those days in CLP, you know, we'll be discussing stuff and like, look where we are right now. And we all thought we were going to practice law, but he's a cop and I'm with UNHCR. So interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, that CLP experience is something I think even people outside the legal sector hear about. And maybe we can hear from Thulsi to add on about your experience in CLP and how do you finance your education.
I did not do CLP actually. I am one of the lucky few who managed to get into a public university. So I read law in UM. So this is one of the things I would like to just put it out there that the opportunities to study in a public university is quite good, So don't sort of minus it or out of your options straight away, because there are public universities who provide which provide really quality degree, and it will carry you through your professional life, and UM is one of it. So I read law in UM, and it was a 4-year course. So my final year helps me to my final year in UM, and the subjects I take in my final year in UM is pretty much 50 to 60% of what CLP students do. And I also had to take an advocacy subject. So UM trains you to be a lawyer that goes to court in your final year itself. It's a 1-year course. And I had a lecturer who taught me how to take a case, how to prepare your documents. So it's exactly like a court process, So it was very helpful. And speaking about finances, I'm very lucky because public university is subsidized. So I can share with you the range of fees. Yeah, I think my entire degree cost somewhere around 4 years of law degree in UM cost about 58 to 60,000. But all I had to pay was about 5 to 6,000 ringgit for 4 years. The rest was subsidized by the government. So yes, the government of Malaysia's public education system is good. Yeah, of course it's good. It's just there are elements that needs to be improved. But essentially, I will credit the government for providing and continue to provide free education. Of course, there are groups who say, higher education and tertiary education should also be 100% free. That's a separate story by itself, but that is what I did. So all I had to pay was around 5 to 6,000 ringgit, and other costs include I stayed in campus 4 years full, so I had to pay like campus fees and all that. I did not take PTPTN loan. I was very lucky. My parents paid for it because it wasn't much. Honestly, it wasn't much. So I survived through law school in a public university, and I'm PTPTN debt free after my studies.
That is the dream. Wow. Thulsi, to be debt free and especially for your education loan, which is something I think that haunts a lot of us throughout the first decade of our career. Ali, I think you went to a local university as well, right? But you went to MMU, which is actually a private uni, but it was also a 4-year course. And you mentioned earlier in the session that you did an internship. So maybe you can share a bit more of that experience at MMU, and also how the financing of your education went.
Okay, yeah. So Multimedia Ministry is a university under the Telecom Malaysia. So it was formerly known as University Telecom, so it changed to MMU throughout the years. The law degree started back in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. So as a private university, it always comes with the requirement to have your CLP done after your graduation. So I think post 2006, 2007, they had the CLP exemption. So once we graduate, we don't need to sit for the CLP. But in order for the university to be continually exempted from the CLP, they make the exams quite hard. The markings are quite strict. So, and then there's a number of quota for students to pass per year. So I think there were like 80 only. They only limit slots for grads for 80 grad students per year, per academic year. So since it's a private university, of course, it doesn't have that much of a subsidy from the government. The law program back in 2013, 2017, the fee was around 40K. So I applied for a loan because of course I couldn't afford myself to pay 40K. And so I applied for a loan, PTPN. They gave us a monthly allowance to spend on food, place to stay, everything. But for the 4 years, for the before that, in MMU you have campus accommodation as well. We call it asrama, college asrama lah. So I stayed there, and not only because it's very cheap, but for me, a 5-minute walk to campus is like very far already. So I need to stay in campus. 8 a.m. class, I need to get up at 7:50 earliest. So I'm like, okay, I cannot do any more earlier than that. I cannot get up any earlier than that. So that saves a lot of money, saves a lot of time. And then as for PTPN, you need to pay back almost 100%. So, but if you manage to obtain a CGPA above a certain point of CGPA, you'll get a lot of discounts. And then if you obtain a first class degree, you can I think it'll be automatically converted to a scholarship. I'm not that smart, but I managed to get a 80% discount for my pointer. So I paid after after I graduated, I managed to settle off the loan. So the message here is that, okay, don't do really well, but don't do really bad either lah. But still, of course, I try your best.
Very mixed messages, Ali. All right, thank you so much, Ali. And I think it is very, very eye-opening, right? Of all the options, again, we have not of picking a degree, but picking where you want to study, and within a certain degree also you have different options, different universities, different financial options. And I guess just for the sake of variety, I can share a bit of my experience. So I studied the University of London program. I think Deven, I believe you did the same. And I studied in ATC. It was completely self-funded. I did not apply for a PTPTN. And I studied the bar in the UK. So for our audience who's looking to have a bit more, like, can I study this internationally? Do I have to do my entire law degree locally? You do have options. You can, take either the University of London programs. They have the UK transfer programs that allows you to do like a twinning in the UK. And I think not very well known, but also possible is with the law degree itself. You can study law in the Commonwealth countries, because all of us share pretty much similar base with the UK, like India, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. So there is, but it's not very popular. So for those who are looking, can I need to leave this place? I need to leave Malaysia. You have options as well. And I think we've covered a lot today, I think, but there is, of course, so much more we can go on and talk about. Unfortunately, we are limited by our time, and we do have other sessions in store. But before that, I do want to come back to what Thulsi said, right, about options in PTP and public universities. Do stay on after this for our audience members. We do have both sessions today. In fact, I think, focus on PTPTN later. I think we have at 1 p.m. we have a session for that. And if you have any questions for our audience members, you can come back and ask our expert on the subject, Puan Intan, later. I'd like to thank our speakers so much for taking your time out today and speaking to us, speaking to our larger audience. Thank you, Deven. Thank you, Thulsi. Thank you, Ali.